If you are a Ruby Amethyst player and you anticipate seeing the mirror match a lot, whether that's in real life at locals or online on Pixelborn, there is definitely a case to be made to include Spellbook in your build. And that's what we're going to showcase today in this matchup, where I have put in 2 copies of Spellbook and I've edited my tier 0 list, which is linked in the description if you want to see kind of what was done there. And it's proven to be quite effective in these mirror matches. In this matchup here, our build is focused on card advantage and board advantage, which I think is the strongest version. And my opponent is on a more aggro version running the Pascals, and you're going to see here they're running another card that helps them win the mirror in the Arthur. And I've already talked about this and covered this card in this build already. It is extremely strong. The only detriment to Arthur is that it does have a significant weakness in other certain matchups, but that can be also said about Spellbook. In the end, personally, I think Spellbook offers more utility in the mirror match than Arthur, because you can see me overcommitting. I go -2 in order to out the one Arthur on board, but I was still able to out it. Whereas when Spellbook is dropped, the opponent has no interaction with it because there is no item removal on either Amethyst or Ruby. I did all that for nothing though, because the opponent had another Arthur, but at least I was able to stop the Mim Arthur loop here, unless they have another Mim, but then they'd have to bounce their Arthur back, so I'm pretty safe. The Mim Arthur loop is extremely broken because it just recycles your Mim so that you can consistently drop it and protect your Arthur or protect anything else by bouncing it back to hand. So getting the Maui on field there was pretty crucial. So this is why I prefer Spellbook over Arthur in the mirror match, but Arthur definitely has more application in other matchups, I think. Like Spellbook is really, really bad in the hyper aggro match, and Arthur is also bad in that match, but at least Arthur has a little bit more utility because you can recycle some of your cards and reutilize them, and that bounce effect is actually a big plus. However, in this mirror match, it looks like my opponent is now in total control. They're ahead on lore, they're ahead on card advantage, they could have or technically should have had tempo, but again, because of the way that their build is set up with the LeFous and the Arthurs and the Pascals and stuff, they're a little bit slower to establish board control because they're more aggro oriented, and it has paid off for them. They're ahead in the lore. You can see here the opponent, in my opinion, makes a little bit of a mistake, committing on the board a little too much, overextending into a turn 7 be prepared, which is exactly what we're going to drop. And this was the tempo swing of the match, because my build, like I said, is focused on generating card advantage and board advantage. And while the opponent likely has a Merlin Min package of their own, you can see here that they're on that aggro-esque build where they can afford to play things like Scar and Shere Khan and other rush characters because they're just generating all that lore no matter what they do. Challenge, quest, play goats, etc. So the opponent again drops I wouldn't say a wide board, but they do commit a little bit. And at this point, I'm like, I'm fine because I have the second rabbit in hand to be prepared and get that Tremaine off the field. The opponent has missed an ink or two, I think, basically proving that they have uninkables in hand. But they opt to play Snake to bounce the rabbit back, so they get a nice draw 2 during that turn, and now they're able to ink again. So the opponent on 4 cards, I decided to drop a Tremaine here because I thought my opponent for some reason was on like 8 ink and that they would Maleficent, so I didn't want to drop the Ursula. But they are playing Dragonfires on top of that. And I have seen this being teched in certain matchups to help with the Amethyst Steel, because turn 5 dropping it on Beast, Tragic Hero is very good to stop them from getting any advantage off of it. But I just don't like Dragonfire in general. I think you have many other ways to deal with the Tragic Hero. It's usually not going to be a huge factor. The opponent on 8 ink now, tied with me, is going to reveal double Merlin. And while this looks pretty decent for the opponent, not being able to recycle their Merlin means that I can out their 3rd rabbit with my Be Prepared. Yes, they'll draw 2, but that's fine to get all of their rabbits out of rotation. During the endgame, the rabbit cycling is a pretty critical piece to generate a lot of card advantage. And this was another inflection point in the match, knowing that from this point on, I should be able to out-advantage my opponent in terms of card advantage. And it's pretty funny what ends up happening, as you probably can tell from the timestamp of the video. This match goes on for a little while longer. And at a certain point, you have to be very aware of decking out. And this is once again in the control mirror where Spellbook can come in handy. Because out of the 20 or so cards I have left in my deck, there's still 2 Spellbooks in there. And if I get 2 Spellbooks up, it's basically like a 5-turn clock because I should have some lore, and then I should be able to close it out with the Spellbooks and whatever I have on field to quest with. And again, being on Ruby, I should be able to remove any of the opponent's threats. I'm drawing a ton of cards, so I should have answers to anything the opponent plays. As long as I keep them off of GOAT range to close the game out, I should be fine. If they have their own spellbook and they establish it before me, well, it is what it is, and I likely lose the match. But here you can see that I do draw the spellbook eventually. I don't overcommit because I wanted my opponent to be prepared there. I am expecting that they have them, and sure enough, they did. So once again, I'm going to opt to just play a little slow. I'm probably going to ink a Mim Fox and play a Mim Fox because at this point, the bounce back effects, they're good, but I have enough advantage at this point that I think I can kind of see out the match now that I have the spellbook in rotation because I have a number of different removal options. The opponent drops the Tremaine that I think they bounce back to hand most likely, and then they have 4 more ink. They opt to Mim Fox it back to hand once again and pass. So now that they're not threatening 2 lore, I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable here. I'm going to opt to drop my Tremaine and force the opponent's Fox out here. And then I could drop the Snake to bounce back the Tremaine, so I also have a Tremaine recycle, just like my opponent did. Use the Spellbook and then just pass, and you can see, or I guess ink a Teeth, and then, okay, hard cast to Friends. All right, so we're trying to be ink efficient here. The opponent Dragon fires a Mim Snake and then just passes. So I'm anticipating they have like Maleficent Dragons, Be Prepared, the Lady Tremaines, like a bunch of uninkables in hand. They're out of Merlin Rabbits though, and that's what's important. So you can see just how much advantage we've generated with the Rabbit in the end game. The opponent is going to opt to take the same route and just Be Prepared again to get my Rabbit out of rotation. And they've used up 3 Be Prepared, that's what I checked right there. And at this point, I'm very aware that I am on like either 13 or I get down to like 10 cards at one point. I'm going to double drop here to play around the Lady Tremaine so that I don't have to out my own Surfer. But the opponent reveals, I think this is their 3rd Be Prepared. Maybe they only had 2 last turn and that was their 3rd one. They've got 24 left in their deck. Yeah, so I checked there. There's 3 Be Prepared in the discard pile. I have 13, now 12. And at this point, I don't really want to draw any more cards, but I will draw with Ursula when I play it. After this, I don't want to draw any more cards because I technically still want to see that second Spellbook, because that puts it on a 5-turn clock. If this Ursula survives, it's even better. So once again, I'm anticipating that the opponent doesn't have a 4th Be Prepared. So if they Maleficent Dragon or Lady Tremaine, I should still have a threat on board. They Yzma back my Ursula in order to force me to draw 2. So this is just speeding up the deck out for myself even faster. And then they drop a Minnie Mouse. And at this point, I'm like, I could be prepared, but like I don't care about you getting 4 lore. So instead, I'm going to end up dropping a Fox to recycle Goat and then just replay the Goat, because that'll put me on 17 and it forces you to answer one of the, unless you win next turn, I will be able to be prepared my own Goat, use Spellbook, and win the game. So that's a GG. Again, if you're interested in this kind of content, the more competitive content, let me know in the comment section below. I know this is like pretty common to see, especially if you play more competitively, but this is kind of what the meta is, right? And knowing these little nuances on how different cards and different plays can affect the matchup is important if you want to win. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. Thank you again for watching. If you made it this far, Quantum is out.